Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. Tonight I present to you The Sleepy House, a house occupied by a very sleepy family known as the Dormers. Mr. Dormer is a professor of sleep, and Mrs. Dormer is an avid studier of sleep, along with her children. And on this day that we will meet them, they are having a lazy day together, talking about some of the best sleeps they have ever had, and you are welcome to join them. Okay, let's do the relaxation session first, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever you lie upon tonight. And beneath what you lie upon, feel a deeper support, the support of the earth, our home, our constant support. And as you become aware of that support, see if you can sink into this moment a little more now. Just let go. A little more now. 9. You are safe. Allow my voice to be an anchor of safety tonight, to be a friend, to be a gentle guide, a guide that only ever brings you to safe places, to warm and cozy places, to places that enable and support your sleep. Trust that my voice is a friend tonight. Eight. Feel into your body now. Notice where you might still be holding tonight. Notice where you may have pain or tingling or tension. Notice anything. Maybe you feel something in your feet or in your lower legs or your thighs or your belly, your chest, shoulders, arms, hands. Or maybe you're like me and you hold tension in your face. Just see if you can soften a little now. This is a time for kindness to yourself and to your body. 7. The day is done. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. But right now, all you have is this moment. Your thoughts can't change what has gone before. Your thoughts can't change what will come tomorrow. Your brain needs rest now. So, as thoughts come and go now, don't fight them. Don't chase them away. See them for what they are. Thoughts. Then just watch them go, like leaves floating away on a moonlit river, or clouds passing through a starlit sky. Six. This is your moment. This is your time. You have earned this moment of kindness to yourself. You deserve to have peace in your life. We all do. So, as you become aware of that fact, as you come to the understanding that we all deserve peace, see if you can settle into this moment a little more now, letting your body know that it's really time for rest. Five. Peace lives within you. It is a constant friend, waiting to be found, waiting to be felt. Where does it live within you? Maybe it's in your heart. Maybe it's in your head. It's up to you to find it. But I promise you it's there. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things, for your body, for the shelter you have tonight, for the ones you love and who love you, for the beauty and wonder of this world, of this planet, that you can find when you look for it. Three, begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see a beautiful, big, cozy house, otherwise known as the House of Sleep. Inside the house, there is a family of people who love everything about sleep. A kind and warm family who you will learn about very soon. 2. Checking in with your body one more time now. Finding the places you are holding still, and allowing yourself to give in, to allow the tension to ease away. Your body has worked hard for you today. It's time to give it rest. And 1, completely letting go now, as I tell you tonight's sleep story. There once was a house, a big house. But this was no ordinary big house, for it was known locally as the House of Sleep. And there was a very good reason for that, because the family who lived there were the sleepiest family you would ever meet. They were known as the Dormers, a name they carried with quiet pride, fully aware of how it suited them. Mr. Dormer was a professor of sleep, which surprised nobody at all. He knew when to go to bed, how long to stay there, and exactly how one should lie when drifting off. He could talk for hours about naps, nighttime routines, and the curious way the body knows when it has had enough of the day. Mrs. Dormer was just as devoted, though in a different way. Where Mr. Dormer studied sleep, Mrs. Dormer practiced it with gentle skill. She believed sleep was something you prepared for, like a guest coming to stay. She moved through the house in soft slippers, opening curtains at the right times, dimming lamps before they thought to shine too brightly, and serving evening meals that made everyone feel pleasantly heavy and ready to rest. She kept notebooks filled with observations about dreams that people mentioned over breakfast. She was always listening, and she was always curious. Then there were the children. There was Oliver Dormer, who collected pillows the way other children collected stamps. Flat ones, puffy ones, cool ones, warm ones, each carefully labeled and tested. His sister Mabel preferred sounds. She had jars, actual jars, each said to contain a sound that she liked to fall asleep to. One was marked rain, another wind in trees, and another simply said quiet. No one was quite sure how she managed it, but nobody questioned it either. Dinner at the Dormer house was unlike dinner anywhere else. While other families talked about school or work, the Dormers discussed sleep with great enthusiasm. Someone might mention a particularly good stretch in the night, or a dream that wandered off halfway through and never came back. Mr. Dormer would nod thoughtfully. Mrs. Dormer would smile, and the children would listen, as if these were the most important matters in the world, which, in that house, they were. And the house itself seemed to agree. It leaned into sleep in every possible way, as though it had been built with bedtime in mind. Corridors curved gently instead of running straight. Doors closed with soft sighs, and every room had its own way of helping you wind down. But that is a story that takes time, and I'll tell you more later. For the house of sleep was never in a hurry. Let's join the Dormers now on a very rainy Saturday. It is a quiet, relaxed morning, and each member of the family is lying horizontally in their bed, just as they prefer, lazily and slowly greeting the day ahead. Rain presses gently against the windows, and it feels as if it has nowhere else to be. None of the Dormers have much to do today, and so they meet the morning with gentleness, as they do every day. The weekend, of course, allows for even more of it. In Mr. and Mrs. Dormer's room, the curtains are still mostly closed, leaving the light soft and grey. Mr. Dormer lies on his side, knees slightly bent, one hand resting on the coverlet. He is awake, but in no rush to prove it. He listens to the rain for a long while, before thinking anything at all. Eventually, he says quietly, "That's a good sound," and then says nothing more. The bed, wide and well used, seems to agree by remaining perfectly still. Mrs. Dormer is awake too, though she hasn't opened her eyes yet. She lies flat on her back, breathing slowly, noticing how heavy the blankets feel in the most pleasing way. She shifts her feet once, then lets them be. Somewhere nearby, a drip from a gutter finds a steady rhythm. "Rain suits a Saturday," she murmurs, mostly to herself. The room smells faintly of clean linen and the lavender soap she likes, a smell that belongs to mornings like this. Along the hallway, Oliver is stretched diagonally across his bed, blanket twisted around one leg, pillow hugged close. He has woken, decided there was no reason to move, and settled back into stillness. He watches a small trail of rain slide down the window pane, following it with his eyes until it disappears. "I might stay here a bit," he says to no one in particular, which feels like the correct decision. Mabel's door remains closed, exactly as it should be. Inside, she lies curled on her side, one hand tucked under her cheek, listening. The rain, the house, the distant hush of everything outside combine into something she finds deeply reassuring. She smiles faintly, turns her pillow over to the cooler side, and sighs. The big, sleepy house them all gently in place, content to let the morning take as long as it likes. Then, very slowly, one by one, the dormers begin to leave their beds. No doors are opened suddenly. No footsteps hurry. Mr. Dormer goes first, easing his way onto the landing in his dressing gown, one hand resting lightly on the banister. The stairs curve gently downward, never straight, as though they were designed to discourage rushing. Mrs. Dormer follows a few minutes later, pausing halfway to look out the tall window where rain continues its quiet work. It's still at it, she says calmly. Good, Mr. Dormer replies from below. Oliver appears next, socks sliding slightly on the carpeted steps, followed eventually by Mabel, who takes each stair as if it deserves attention. The house seems pleased to have them moving through it. The walls bend softly, rather than meeting at sharp corners, and the light is warm, despite the grey morning outside. The lamps are already on. Nothing gleams, nothing startles. Even the clock ticks in a considerate manner. In the kitchen, breakfast waits patiently. The table is solid and worn smooth at the edges, surrounded by chairs that invite sitting for a long while. A large cat named Arthur is already curled on one of them, eyes half closed, tail tucked neatly in. Near the door, a calm elderly dog lies stretched out on a thick mat, lifting his head just enough to acknowledge everyone's arrival. Good morning, Mrs. Dormer says to the animals, as naturally as if they'd spoken first. They all sit now, slowly, carefully, pouring tea, passing bread. How did everyone sleep? Mrs. Dormer asks, once everyone has settled. Oliver takes a bite, thinks about it, then says, "Deep, very deep." Mabel nods. "I didn't wake up at all," she adds. Mr. Dormer listens with interest, hands folded around his mug. "That's exactly what we're aiming for," he says, pleased. They linger over breakfast and talk about dreams that drifted in and out, about moments of waking and choosing not to move, about how the rain made everything slower. The house of sleep holds the sound of their voices gently, keeping them low and even. Arthur the cat stretches once and resettles. The dog sighs and closes his eyes again. "5 minutes until the Saturday sleep lecture," Mr. Dormer says, in exactly the same tone he always uses. And then the family gathers without discussion, all wearing thick socks, loose jumpers, soft trousers, all chosen with care. They settle into the sitting room, where the walls curve gently, and nothing feels fixed in place. Arthur the cat curls himself into a determined circle, and the dog, whose name is Bernard, by the way, lowers himself onto the rug with a long, satisfied breath. Then Mr. Dormer begins to speak, and everyone can tell he's enjoying himself, as he always does in his sleep lectures. "A really good night's sleep," he says, "has a way of changing the following day. You might not notice it at first. You might think nothing much has happened. But then you find yourself moving more slowly, thinking more clearly, and feeling oddly generous toward the world. I've always thought that's one of sleep's finest tricks." "I've slept well in many places," he continues. "Beds I knew well, beds I didn't, sofas, trains, once even a very questionable armchair. But there was a particular stretch of time in the 1990s that I often think back on, especially when I want to remind myself what rest can feel like when you let it happen properly. I was travelling then. No real plan, just a bag, a notebook, and a willingness to stay longer than intended. I ended up on a small island, the kind with one shop, a handful of houses, and very little interest in hurrying. The days there seemed longer, really much longer, in the most beautiful way possible. One afternoon, after a long walk and a simple lunch, I found a hammock strung up between two posts near the shore. The fabric was faded from years of use, and it dipped low, close enough to the ground that you felt supported rather than suspended. I remember kicking off my shoes and noticing how warm the sand still was underneath my feet. I lay back and adjusted myself once or twice, the way you do, until everything felt settled. Above me, the sky was wide and pale. Around me were small, ordinary sounds. A rope creaking slightly. The ocean. A distant voice carrying across the air. Nothing demanding my attention. Nothing asking me to respond. I stayed there a long while. Long enough for my thoughts to slow and then wander off entirely. Long enough for my body to decide, quite on its own, that this was a good place to stop for a bit. When I woke, the light had shifted, and I remember feeling pleasantly disoriented, as though I had stepped out of time and then been placed back gently. I didn't jump up. I didn't check anything. I just stayed there, noticing how calm I felt, how settled. It struck me then how rarely we allow ourselves to rest in that way, fully, without conditions, without a list waiting in the background. He clears his throat softly and continues. That day stayed with me because it reminded me of something simple. Sleep doesn't need perfect circumstances. It doesn't need effort or cleverness. It needs space. Space to arrive when it's ready. Whether that's in a hammock on a faraway island, or here in our very own house of sleep. And that's why we take our time with it in this house. We make room for rest. We treat it as something worth listening to. Arthur shifts slightly and settles again. Bernard thumps his tail once against the rug and goes still. The lesson hangs in the room, unhurried, exactly as Mr. Dormer intended. Mr. Dormer lets the quiet sit for a moment, then smiles to himself. I think that's enough for me today, he says, with the air of someone who truly means it. He shifts slightly in his chair and looks across the room. Your mother tells her stories better than I do anyway. Mrs. Dormer laughs softly, already shaking her head, but the family turns toward her with interest. Arthur lifts one eyelid. Bernard remains perfectly still, listening in his own way. Mrs. Dormer folds her hands in her lap before she begins. I've never been good at analyzing sleep, she says. I don't measure it, or name it, or try to understand it too much. I just notice how it arrives and what it leaves behind. She pauses, thinking. One of the sleeps I remember most clearly happened many years ago on a night train in Italy when I was travelling north after a few long days in Naples. I remember boarding the train as evening was settling in. The station was busy in that lively, untidy way. Voices echoing under high ceilings, people hugging, waving, promising to write. My carriage was narrow, with bunks tucked neatly into the walls, and a small window beside my seat. Everything smelled faintly of metal, fabric, and old journeys. I stowed my bag, took off my shoes, and sat for a moment, listening as the train prepared itself to leave. When it finally moved, there was a gentle sway to it, side to side. Nothing sharp or jarring. I watched lights pass the window, then towns, then long stretches of darkness, broken only by the occasional signal. I pulled the blanket up around my shoulders and lay back, not expecting anything in particular, just letting the movement do what it always does. At some point, the train settled into a steady rhythm, and I remember feeling held by it. Not held in place, but carried. I drifted in and out, aware of small things, the muffled sound of footsteps in the corridor, a door closing somewhere down the carriage, the way the air changed as we climbed, cooler and cleaner, even through the glass. I woke briefly in the early hours and realized we were far from where we had started. The names on the stations no longer sounded southern. The world outside had shifted without my involvement. I found that comforting. I lay there, wrapped up and warm, knowing that I was being brought closer to the mountains, while I did absolutely nothing to help it along. She smiles now at the memory. That sleep taught me something different to what your father studies. I learned that rest can happen while life keeps moving. You don't always need stillness or silence. Sometimes it's enough to trust that you're on your way somewhere, and to allow yourself to close your eyes while the journey continues. She leans back into her chair, the story complete, and the room holds the feeling of it, calm and settled, just as the big, sleepy house always does. The room stays quiet for a short while. After Mrs. Dormer finishes speaking, the family sits as they are, comfortable and settled, each of them holding on to a small part of the story in their own way. Arthur shifts his weight and presses more firmly into the cushion. Bernard lets out a low breath and rests his chin on his paws. Oliver is the first to speak. He leans forward slightly and looks at his parents. "Can I ask you something?" he says. Mr. Dormer nods, encouraging without words. "When you talk about those sleeps," Oliver continues, "how do you remember so much? I mean, the small details. I usually forget those." Mrs. Dormer smiles at him. "You don't forget them," she says. "They just come back when they're ready." Mabel watches Oliver for a moment, then looks at her mother. "Did you know you were sleeping well on the train?" she asks. Mrs. Dormer thinks about this. "I knew I felt safe," she says. "I knew I didn't need to stay awake. That was enough." Mr. Dormer nods in agreement. "Sleep often begins there," he adds quietly. Oliver sits back, considering this, then glances at Mabel. She has gone very still, eyes focused somewhere just past the room. After a moment she says, "Can I tell you about a sleep I had last year? I forgot to mention it at the time." Both parents turn toward her at once. "Of course," Mrs. Dormer says. "We'd like that." "It was that night," Mabel begins. "Do you remember? When there was a big thunderstorm?" She pauses, letting the memory line itself up properly. "I went to bed early because I felt tired before anyone else. I remember lying there and listening as the first thunder rolled across the sky. It didn't scare me. It felt big and far away." She continues slowly, choosing her words. "The flashes of light came through the curtains, lighting up the room for a second at a time. I watched them until my eyes felt heavy. The bed felt extra warm. and I remember pulling the blanket up and turning onto my side. The sounds outside were loud, but they made the inside feel even more sheltered. I must have fallen asleep while listening, she says, because the next thing I remember is waking up in the morning and feeling as though I hadn't moved at all, like the night had passed around me and I'd stayed exactly where I was. The family listens quietly. Mr. Dormer nods once, pleased. Mrs. Dormer reaches out and rests her hand gently on Mabel's knee. The story settles into the room, joining all the others that live comfortably inside the house of sleep. Oliver clears his throat softly, the way he does when he has been thinking about something for a while. He glances down at Bernard, who hasn't moved since settling on the rug. "Can I talk about Bernard?" he asks. Mr. Dormer smiles at once. "I was hoping someone would," he says. Oliver leans forward and lowers his voice slightly, as though he doesn't want to disturb the subject of his question. "He sleeps more than anyone I know," he says. "Sometimes I think he's asleep almost all day. Why do animals need so much more sleep than we do?" Bernard's ear flicks once, but he remains otherwise committed to resting. Mr. Dormer considers this carefully. "Animals are very good at listening to their bodies," he says. "They don't argue with tiredness. When they need rest, they take it. They don't push through it, or delay it, or promise to do it later." Mrs. Dormer nods. "They also feel safe enough to sleep," she adds. "That makes a big difference." Oliver watches Bernard's slow, steady breathing. "So he's not being lazy," he says. "He's just doing what he's supposed to do." "Exactly," Mr. Dormer replies. "Sleep keeps him balanced. It helps his body recover and his mind stay calm. You can tell a lot about how well a pet feels by how comfortably it sleeps." Mabel reaches down and gently strokes Bernard's head. He opens one eye briefly, then closes it again. "I like that he sleeps near us," she says. Mrs. Dormer smiles. "He likes it too," she replies. It tells him everything is in order. Oliver sits back, satisfied. I think Bernard is very wise, he says. Mr. Dormer chuckles quietly. Many dogs are, he agrees. The room returns to its easy stillness. Bernard continuing his important work, reminding everyone how natural it is to rest when the moment calls for it. After a while, people begin to leave the living room. It feels like time to drift. Mrs. Dormer is the first to wander off. She moves down the corridor toward the rainforest room, her slippers brushing softly against the floor. The room sits at the back of the house, tucked away, as though it prefers a little privacy. Inside, the walls curve inward and upward, painted in deep greens and soft browns. Plants grow everywhere, real ones and imagined ones, leaves overlapping and trailing. Mrs. Dormer settles into a wide chair, closes her eyes, and lets her shoulders drop. Mr. Dormer takes the opposite direction, making his way toward the beach room. He opens the door and steps inside with a familiar ease. Pale colors line the walls, and the floor is covered in sand. A long couch waits near the window, angled just so. He removes his glasses, places them carefully on a small table, and lies down. His hands rest loosely at his sides. This room asks very little of him, and he is happy to agree. The children drift upstairs together, then part ways halfway down the landing. Oliver heads into the sky room, a place with a high ceiling and soft blues everywhere you look. Light shifts slowly across the walls, and there are cushions piled low, perfect for stretching out with a book. Mabel chooses the forest room, smaller and darker, with gentle shadows and a sense of being held. She curls up on a low bed near the wall, pulling a blanket around herself, listening. The house settles again, each room quietly occupied, each person exactly where they need to be. Doors remain open, just enough to feel connected. Sounds move softly from one space to another, never intruding. The sleepy house does what it does best, holding everyone in their small corner of comfort, letting the day unfold without direction, without effort, without hurry. Mrs. Dormer settles herself more deeply now into the rainforest room, adjusting the cushion behind her lower back until it feels just right. The chair welcomes her in the way it always does, wide and forgiving, encouraging stillness. She reaches to the small wooden table beside her and picks up her book, the one she keeps in this room. Its cover is soft from use. She opens it somewhere near the middle, not worrying about chapters, and she begins to read aloud from this book about sleep. Sleep does not arrive on command. It comes when it senses it is welcome. The body listens closely to how the day has been treated, and the mind follows its lead. When there has been kindness, sleep responds in kind. She turns the page, takes a breath, and continues. Preparation for rest begins long before the evening. It begins in the way we move, the way we speak, the way we allow ourselves to stop when stopping feels natural. A day that has been lived gently leaves very little for the night to untangle. Mrs. Dormer pauses here, letting the words settle. She rests the book on her lap for a moment, eyes half closed, then lifts it again. There is no correct way to sleep well. There is only the way that feels steady and safe to you. Some find it in stillness. Others find it in motion. What matters is the feeling of being carried by the moment, rather than pulled through it. She closes the book slowly, marking her place with a thin ribbon, and rests her hands on top of it. The rainforest room holds her comfortably. The gentle sounds of the leaves continuing around her. Mrs. Dormer leans her head back, eyes closing now, content to stay exactly where she is, letting the quiet do the rest. Mr. Dormer lies back for a short while in the beach room, listening to the sounds of the waves, letting the room settle him before he does anything at all. Then, with a small nod to himself, he reaches for the dictaphone he keeps on the table beside the couch. It's an old one, reliable, with a reassuring weight to it. He presses the button, waits for the faint click, and begins to speak in the same calm voice he always uses when he's thinking something through. Another sleep worth remembering, he says, came to me somewhere over the Atlantic many years ago on a long-haul flight when I had expected nothing of the sort. I remember boarding the plane already tired. Not the pleasant kind of tired. The kind that sits behind the eyes and makes everything feel slightly blurred. The cabin was busy. People finding their seats. Overhead lockers opening and closing. I settled in, arranged my jumper as a pillow, and told myself I'd rest my eyes for a moment. The hum of the engines arrived soon after takeoff, low and constant. The lights dimmed gradually, and the cabin seemed to shrink into itself. I noticed the gentle vibration through the seat, and I let my breathing fall into step with it. At some point, without any announcement or effort, I slipped into sleep. Not deeply at first, just enough to loosen my thoughts, then further, until time stopped being something I could measure. I woke briefly once, aware of nothing more than the blanket over my legs and the soft glow along the aisle. And then I drifted again. When I finally woke properly, the cabin felt different, quieter, calmer. The light outside the window had changed. I felt clear-headed, rested in a way I hadn't expected. It struck me then how sleep can arrive even when conditions aren't perfect, when the body finds a rhythm it trusts. That sleep reminded me that rest can happen while we are being carried from one place to another. You don't always need familiarity. Sometimes it's enough to feel supported, to let go of the need to manage what comes next. He clicks the dictaphone off and places it back on the table. The beach room receives the memory without comment. Mr. Dormer closes his eyes again. The couch, holding him easily, content to let the afternoon continue exactly as it is. Time passes by, and night time arrives without announcement. One moment the house is gently occupied, and the next it feels ready for more sleep. Lights soften, doors are eased shut. The sleepy house moves into its nighttime rhythm, familiar and unhurried, as though this has happened the same way every day for a very long time. Mrs. Dormer goes to bed first. She washes, changes into her night clothes, and smooths the bedspread before slipping underneath it. She lies on her side, hands folded comfortably, already drifting toward rest. Mr. Dormer then joins her, places his journal on the bedside table, switches off the lamp, and settles onto his back, breathing slow and steady, satisfied with the day. Oliver climbs into his bed with his favorite pillow tucked under his arm. He adjusts it once, then again, until it feels right, and pulls the covers up to his chin. Mabel curls onto her side, blanket wrapped neatly around her. Eyes closing as soon as her head meets the pillow. Arthur chooses the foot of Oliver's bed. Bernard settles just outside the door, exactly where he likes to be. The house grows quiet. Nothing else needs doing. One by one, The dormers slip into sleep. The rooms gently holding them through the night. The sleepy house doing what it has always done best.